You're listening to The Narrow Mind, show 815, interview with Emilio Ramos on the subject of Islam and the Quran.
You're traveling through another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and of sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of the imagination. There's a signpost up ahead. Your next stop, The Narrow Mind.
And it is Monday night, the 11th of June, 2007. Welcome to another edition of The Narrow Mind. My name is Gene Cook, and I'll be your host, Lord willing, for the next 60 minutes approximately. That's right. If you're new to The Narrow Mind, we'd like to welcome you to the program, but we have to warn you. You have to be careful because we've been told that The Narrow Mind is very addictive. In fact, we'd like to announce our Narrow Mind Addict of the Week. His name is Scott Burness. And you would have already been notified that Scott was the Narrow Mind Addict of the Week if you're a subscriber to the Narrow Mind email update group. And you might be wondering how you subscribe to that. You can just go to the homepage at unchainedradio.com. Click on the little, it looks like a nuclear glowing mailbox there on the homepage. If you click on that, you'll automatically subscribe to the Narrow Mind Update. And what we do is we send out a weekly email letting you know what's going to be on tap for this week as far as schedule and topics and guests. And then we also, from time to time, we'll schedule something at the last minute or feature an extra. And so we'll keep you up to date on that. We'll send out an email letting you know what's going on. Now, to become the Narrow Mind Addict of the Week, all you need to do is write up a favorable review of the Narrow Mind on your blog and send us an email at unchainedradio@unchainedradio.com. And if your blog or your review passes muster, we'll feature you, and you can become the Narrow Mind Addict of the Week. And we guarantee that we'll drive all kinds of traffic there over to your blog. So you get to benefit, and we get to benefit because you help us spread the narrow mind addiction. It's been a while also since we mentioned that we've got the Narrow Mind postcards. We've got these really beautiful 4-color process Narrow Mind postcards. And if you are a Narrow Mind addict and you'd like to help us get the word out, these are great to take to Bible studies and church and work. You can pass them out to unbelievers. And basically it gives information about the Narrow Mind program. It gives the website, some of the topics that we cover. And they're really beautiful postcards. We'll send them out to you for free. If you'd like to get a handful of them, just send me an email. We'll let you pass those out as a favor to us, but we'll send them to you free of charge. We'll even pay for the postage. So you can just send your request, but you need to send your name and your mailing address to unchainedradio@unchainedradio.com. And Grace, my faithful assistant that works very cheap, my wife, will actually get those out to you right away. Okay, we are not going to be having any programs this week between Tuesday and Thursday. So no show on Tuesday, that's the 12th of June. No show on the 13th of June, Wednesday. No show on Thursday, the 14th. We'll be back on Friday evening on the 15th of June for Open Phones Friday. The reason is I'm going to be teaching an upcoming course on apologetics, and I need to get together my syllabus, do some additional study. I got to put together a PowerPoint presentation, and so I want to make sure that I have plenty of time to do that without having any distractions as far as show preparation and things like that. Now, I know some of you Narrow Mind addicts are already beginning to shake just thinking about the and contemplating what it's going to be like to have withdrawals. I apologize. I'll try to post something by way of the podcast or the blog to make sure that you don't have some type of physiological breakdown as a result of no Narrow Mind programs for this week. So we're going to do one tonight, and we'll be doing one on Friday, and hopefully you can bear with us. Now, next week we should be back to our regular 5-day-a-week schedule, Lord willing, and we'll have some topics. I've got a list of topics that I'm getting ready to work on as far as bringing them to you on the program. We've got some really good stuff lined up. Also, I want to let you know that I'm going to be out in the Dallas-Fort Worth area next month, in the month of July. I'm going to be announcing this every day because I know we've got a lot of listeners out in Dallas-Fort Worth, that whole area out there. It's a huge area. We've also got some listeners out in different suburbs and out in the country in Texas. So we'll be announcing this, but we're going to try to set something up on probably Friday the 20th or Friday the 21st of July. I'm going to be out there taking care of some personal business, but I want to try to get together with some of our Narrow Mind listeners. And so we're going to be looking at a possible location if you belong to a church that might be interested in hosting an evening, a Narrow Mind evening. I don't know what you want to call it, a Narrow Mind get-together, a Narrow Mind AA meeting. We could call it that, I suppose. But maybe what I'll do is I'll give maybe a brief introduction to apologetics, or I'll do something that is consistent with what we do here on the Narrow Mind. But I want to start getting the word out now, and I will continue to announce this on a daily basis up until the time that we take the trip. And as soon as we nail down the details on where we're going to be having this event, if it does in fact culminate, then we'll also be letting our Texas listeners know as well. I know Texas is a big state, and so but we do have listeners all over Texas, believe it or not. I get more calls coming out of Texas than any other state, I think. No? My wife is California. Well, that's because our church is in California, and I've got more friends in California. But what's number two? Texas? Yeah, my wife, as she sits over there waiting for Narrow Mind listeners to call, she actually has begun a log of all the callers and where they're from. So the next thing I'm going to have you do over there, sweetheart, is pinpoint them on the map. So I hope you're looking forward to that. All right, let's get down to business. Let's get down to the reason why we're here tonight for the Narrow Mind. I want to introduce to you a friend of mine, a new friend of mine, nevertheless. His name is Emilio Ramos, and he also lives in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Emilio, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Gene. Glad to be on.
All right, and hopefully you will be instrumental in me pulling this get-together off there while I'm in Texas.
Yeah. We're here. We're here at your disposal. Whatever you need, I'd love to facilitate anything we can do for you.
That's great. And in fact, I might even take you up on the invitation to stay at your house. So
I hope so.
Yeah,
because I'd like to pick your brain while you're here.
Okay. All right. There's not much to pick. Pretty much everything that I know, I've already said on the Narrow Mind. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to spending some time with you, and also meeting some of your friends out there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah.
So, by the way, what's the weather like today in Dallas?
The weather is beautiful. It is nice, clear skies. It's a little hot. It's probably about 95 today was the high, and but you couldn't ask for anything better.
Okay, I'm looking forward to coming out there. I think we're going to drive out there. We were going to fly out there in August, and then we talked about, well, it's been a long time since we took a road trip, and so I think we might drive out there. So, from what I understand, it's about a 2-day drive from San Diego to Dallas.
Yes, it's quite a drive. So just get yourself ready for that.
Yeah, well, I've got a lot of stuff I need to listen to. I can actually probably get caught up. I got my iPod loaded up, and I never have enough time to listen to everything I want to listen to.
Right.
So you and I are going to be talking about Islam tonight and the Quran.
Great.
Now, you were also one of the speakers at the conference that we were both recently invited to give presentations at. It took place in Moreno Valley, which is in Southern California. It was the Worldviews 2000 conference on apologetics, and you gave a presentation on Islam.
I did.
Now, how did you get interested in Islam?
Well, I got interested in Islam through evangelism. I started, going out evangelizing with my local church, and Friday nights we'd go down to Santa Monica, down over by where you're at, actually.
Yeah, that's
Southern California.
Long ways from Fort Worth.
Yeah, and just going out there, I was actually introduced to a gentleman by the name of Josh Lingle, who is he's a professor of advanced apologetics to Islam at Biola University, and he kind of took me under his wing, and we would run into Muslims out there who were very passionate about their religion and their faith, very zealous for Islam, and I just began to get really intrigued, and so I started reading books and articles, and I actually developed a couple friendships out there with some Muslims and that I corresponded with.
Okay, so you began to learn hands-on from just hearing some of the arguments that they use.
Oh, yes.
And how common is it to actually run into a Muslim? When you're out doing evangelism, let's say you talk to 10 people, how many of those people would be Muslims?
Oh, boy. Honestly, you would have to purposely look to get in a conversation with a Muslim. They don't typically go up to you. They kind of let the fight come to them, as it were.
Okay.
But we were out there with Ray Comfort's ministry, open air preaching, and a lot of times he would mention Islam from the microphone. He was totally mic'd up and everything, and he would mention Islam, and so it would draw sort of the Muslims out of the crowd, and that's how we would get in contact with them.
And have you began studying the Quran then?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Is that the right way to say it? Should we say Quran or Quran?
Either way, a conservative Muslim who knows his Arabic well won't respect any of your, won't really respect it either way that you try to pronounce it. I've tried to appease the pronunciation issue, but I just can't pronounce it like the Arab-speaking Muslims can. Quran, it's either will do.
Okay, and do you see Quran, not Quran, but Islam as a growing threat to Christianity?
Oh yes, absolutely, and I would say particularly in the field of missions. If your church is doing any kind of missions to Muslim nations, you'll run into severe problems on the mission field with Muslims. They're not. It's not like the West. It's not like America. You're not safe in a Muslim nation. And so, yeah, it's definitely a threat, and it's an increasing threat even in the West, yeah.
Yeah, and I travel to East Africa quite a bit. The country that I travel to is they say it's approximately 50% Islam, 50% Christian. But there is, as you know, the northern part of Africa is dominated by Islam.
Yeah.
And they have a plan to move down the continent. So they are slowly moving down, and this form that's moving down actually is more and more aggressive. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the Muslims that I run into in Dar es Salaam, which is also an Arabic name, that's the capital city of Tanzania, is most of these guys are nominal Muslims. They're kind of like the Roman Catholics that we have here in America. They were born into it. They're friendly. They don't know anything about it. They think that we worship the same God.
Right.
And it's really kind of uncomfortable because they're real friendly, and you tell them that you're a Christian, and then they say, oh, well, we worship the same God. Mm-hmm. And then I have to tell them, well, not really, which isn't too comfortable because that kind of takes the smile off their face at that point. But anyhow, why don't you give us a little bit of background? This show can maybe kind of serve as an introduction to Islam for those that may really know nothing about it or very little about it. Why don't you tell us first of all, about Muhammad, the prophet?
Well, Muhammad was born in 570 A.D., and he was born in ancient Arabia, which is modern-day Saudi Arabia, and he was born into a sort of a desert nomadic tribe known as the Quraysh, or some pronounce it Qurayshi tribe. Mm-hmm. And Muhammad was just born as any normal young Arabic boy would be born in the region of Mecca, which today is the central focus of Islam. And Muhammad, from his birth and all the way leading up into his first supposed revelation that came from Allah, had miraculous things that supposedly attested to his prophethood and him being called to be a prophet. But in the earliest times in Islam, Muhammad, in attempting to propagate his new religion, which was monotheistic, as opposed to what was the predominant religious atmosphere in Saudi Arabia at that time, which was polytheism, Muhammad was teaching monotheism, and so he rejected the belief in many gods. And what this led to was Muhammad being expelled out of Mecca, and he was therefore driven to a northern city known as Yathrib, or what we know today as Medina. And it was in Medina that Muhammad really gathered a following for this new faith. and that's where a lot of the initial revelations and initial surahs of the Quran came about. And so since then, Muhammad just continued to amass more and more followers, and before a very short time, Muhammad became a very powerful military leader in essence.
Now, Muhammad's uncle, if I'm not mistaken, was a Christian. Is that right?
According to some traditions, yeah.
Okay. And his wife, I think her name Fatima?
He had and again, this is where it gets sort of difficult, but, regarding what sources you're quoting from, whether you're quoting a certain hadith, and you have to get down to which hadith you're quoting, even the number of Muhammad's wives is in question. But yeah, one of his wives, I think it was Khadijah, was supposedly a Christian, and actually took Muhammad to an Nestorian monk to verify whether or not Muhammad was a prophet. And
I've also been told that Muhammad at one point thought that he was demon-possessed.
Yes. Those are traditions that you can find very easily in Sahih Al-Bukhari, which is a compiler of the traditions known as the Hadith, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Those types of things are easily found in Muslim tradition. Okay, now this is happening in the 6th century, right? What year you said Muhammad was born in 570, and he died in 632. Yes.
Okay, so what was? Because this is a question I have in my mind. Was there a bound Bible circulating at that time? In other words, was there a compilation of the 66 books of the Bible as we know them today, circulating at that time, known as the Christian Scriptures?
Circulating in that area at the time?
Yeah, or available to Christians. I mean, if, let's say, for example, his uncle was a Christian, I'm wondering what scriptures he would have had in his immediate, immediately available to him.
Well, I think there definitely was the circulation of different manuscripts of the Bible. Of course, by this time the Vulgate would have been written, and the concept, the text that would have resulted from that. Many of the early councils that dealt with the canon of Scripture had already taken place, and we know that there was Christian influence in Muhammad's time. As a matter of fact, if you look at the Quran, one of the interesting features about the Quran is that it contains several references, as you well know, to the Bible. So there was definitely scriptures that were readily available at that time. Yeah.
Because one of the things we always hear from Muslims is that the Bible has been corrupted.
Yes.
Which is interesting because that's the same thing we hear from Mormons, but they say that the Bible was corrupted. So I'm wondering if it's possible to make a connection with the Bible that was available, say, for instance, in the time of Muhammad, to the Bible that we have now, to show, look, it's the same Bible. It's not as if there's been this massive corruption that's taken place from between 600 AD and now.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, by that time you have Vaticanus, I believe you have Alexandrinus, or I'm not sure I'm getting my pronunciation right here, but you have the Bodmer Papyri, and you have a plethora of manuscript evidence for the Bible at this time. So there's definitely the burden of proof with an allegation by Islam of that caliber that says that the Bible that the Christians possess today has been corrupted. That argument is subject to some serious proof that the Muslims, frankly, just can't supply. You would need primary evidence, and I think that's where you're going with this. You would need some sort of primary source material by which you can validate the Bible has indeed been corrupted.
Right. Because Muhammad makes references to the Bible, makes references to Christians, and so there's no doubt that the Bible was in existence, or at least to some degree. So that's often a point that I've thought about. If they're making the claim that it's been corrupted, then what was the standard that they are comparing today's modern versions to? Because that's an important
Exactly.
question. You can't just assert these types of things without any type of evidence.
Exactly, and if you study that argument in detail, I think the argument originated with a Muslim scholar by the name of Tabari, who was, I believe, lived in the 10th century, who really began to propagate this whole idea of the Bible being corrupted, and particularly the Injil, as respect to the Christians, and the what they call the Tanakh, the Old Testament scriptures of the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
But no, there's no evidence of its corruption. And what's interesting is that if you look at the text in the Quran, nowhere does the Quran claim that the actual manuscripts of the Bible have been corrupted. This is an Arabic word known as musaif, and this word is not in reference here when the Quran speaks of the Christians who have confused maybe the teachings of the Injil being the Arabic word for the four Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no reference to the actual manuscripts of the Bible being corrupted. It's an allegation that Christians have corrupted the interpretation, and so you can come at it that way as well.
Okay, let's talk for a moment about the transmission of the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
How did the Quran come about?
Well, the Quran, you have two stories regarding that. You have the Muslim account, and then you have a secular or just an objective account of how that really took place. Obviously, Muslims will tell you that the Quran came about in the lifetime of Muhammad, and that many Muslims will say that. And I've met dozens of Muslims on the street who will say that the Quran is the same Quran that existed in the life of Muhammad, in the days of Muhammad. The problem with this is that, according to Muslim tradition itself, no text of the Quran existed during the life of Muhammad. And so that the Quran was compiled by the followers and the successors of Muhammad, particularly dealing with the caliphs, which the caliph is in reference to the immediate successors of Muhammad. And when you look at the third successor, the third caliph, by the name of Uthman, he actually took upon the burden of standardizing and collecting the sources of the Quran so that the Muslim community would have one standard text.
So there were variations in what they were claiming was the Quran.
Oh yeah.
And so this guy Uthman, he rounds them all up, and he basically says, "Okay, we're going to choose one of these versions, and the other ones are going to be burned."
Exactly, and you know what I like to stress at this point with Muslims is that all of that, and for what you just said, all of that originates out of Muslim tradition.
So where, for example, could we find this recorded in Muslim tradition?
Oh, you can find that recorded in Bukhari. You can find that recorded in Muslim. These are compilers of a Muslim tradition who adamantly say that in fact the Quran had various texts, and that it did not have one standard text. And so, according to Muslim tradition itself, there were other texts that existed at this time. For example, you have the text of Ibn Masud, you have the text of Ibn Ka'b, you have several texts in existence at this time that consequently conflicted with each other.
So there wasn't a unity. Now, as Muhammad was walking around giving these revelations, was there anybody following him around writing down what he was saying?
Yeah, yes. These were known as the reciters of the Quran and the immediate followers of Muhammad. And what they would write the Quran on were just really anything they can get a hold of, which is really interesting when you consider that even at this time in ancient Arabia, there was very good writing material available, but yet when you look to the sources of the Quran, you find that it was written on bark, it was written on scraps of paper, even bones. And that's because some some have diagnosed Muhammad as an epileptic, and this is kind of a point of controversy. But he is known to have fallen into some sort of convulsions, and he has. There's even a book. The actual title escapes me right now, but there's actually a book that was put out by an MD who diagnosed all the symptoms of Muhammad as being epileptic. And so you have the possibility of this man, Muhammad, having these epileptic fits, and immediately afterwards, a supposed revelation from God emerges, and his followers are meant to write it down.
So they think that while he's going into convulsions, he's basically apprehended by the Spirit of God, much the way that a Pentecostal would be.
Correct.
Or not. I don't want to broad brush Pentecostals. Let's say an extreme Pentecostal.
Okay.
All right, because we have some Pentecostal listeners. We don't want to scare them off now, because we love them also.
That's right.
All right, so you've got Muhammad there. He's giving these revelations. You got people writing them on whatever they can find. And then at what stage are they kind of rounded up and compared, or is there any command by Muhammad to compile them and to make a volume out of them?
Well, this is a controversial issue even within Islam, that nowhere in the Quran and many of the different traditions actually talk about the idea that Muhammad himself never called for a compilation of the surahs, of the revelations. Mm-hmm. And so that even by the attempting to compile the Quran, you were going, in essence, against the Prophet Muhammad's will, that he did not call for such a compilation. And so really this is something that man took upon himself to do.
Interesting. All right, let's continue talking about this. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue talking to our guest, Emilio Ramos, about the subject of Islam and the Quran.
This is M in First Class Thornsbury. I am an airborne cryptologic linguist stationed in Monterey, California. And when my friends are out on leave and liberty during the weekends, I stay in and listen to The Narrow Mind.
Dang!
I just wanted to let you know that I listen to The Narrow Mind. Even though my parents are Muslims, I sneak out and put it on the podcast on my iPod Nano. Thank you very much.
There's Betty Stevenson, an ex-con and former drug addict, struggling to raise 2 kids when Mormon missionaries come by.
And they came in and told me the most preposterous story I have ever heard in my life. They told me about this white boy, a dead angel, and some gold plates. And I thought, I wonder what they own.
This is Dr. Bob Morey, and I have to come to Addicts Anonymous. I come before you faced with an addiction that I simply can't overcome. I am addicted to Gene Cook's Unchained radio program, and I just simply can't kick the habit. But this is an addiction to which I invite you. One injection possibly will lead to your addiction as well.
It's about 36 minutes after the hour of 6 o'clock here on the West Coast. I'm looking at the temperature stats, 77 degrees outside with 46% humidity. A little bit nicer than it is in Dallas, but hey, we pay extra for the air conditioning. All right, now, hey, Emiliano. We got a guy in our church, a member of our church named Emiliano. We call him Emil, so I keep getting confused about your name. Emilio. What I didn't mention, Emilio, what I didn't mention to our listening audience is that you're actually married to somebody famous.
Somewhat, yeah.
Now, why don't you tell us who your wife is so that those that may have heard her work will know who you're married to?
Oh, well, I have the blessing of being married to Tricia Ramos, who is an employee of Way of the Master, and has a segment on the Way of the Master radio show every week, Thursdays. I don't know what time they're on at different places, but I mean, they have hundreds of different internet lines and landlines, and here in Texas, a local radio station, KDKR 91.3, every day from, I think it is 3 to 5 or 2 to 5. She can be found street fishing, they call it, and basically what it is that we go out into the streets and find people that are willing to go on the radio and get into a live witnessing encounter with somebody in the studio, be it Todd Friel, the host of the Way of the Master Radio, or Ray Comfort or Kirk Cameron, and they do live witnessing encounters in essence. So my wife's segment's called Fish with Trish, and she's had really, really good success with that so far, so we're really blessed.
Yeah, I've actually appreciated many of the conversations. That's one of the podcasts that I subscribe to. My wife doesn't let me listen to it in the car anymore, though, because she can't stand Todd Friel's voice going up and down. You know how he kind of yells in the microphone when he gets excited?
Yeah.
Because it gets real loud on the stereo, and she's like, why is he so excited? You know, she's more kind of a laid-back person.
Right.
But I do listen to it on a regular basis, and I've heard Trish out there, and I've been blessed by her encounters. Especially, one comes to mind. I think she was at it was some type of fair or a carnival or something, an amusement park maybe, where she stopped and talked to 3 girls. And I was really, just listening to that dialogue with those 3 girls, I was actually moved emotionally while I was sitting here listening to it, because I just felt compassion for them. And as they were answering questions, you know, a lot of these young kids, they haven't even thought through the implications of their worldview. And
right.
So when you confront them with the reality of, you know, the Creator God, Jehovah God, they sometimes, I mean, they're shocked. They have this look on their face, like, not that I can see them, but I can only imagine that, like they've been caught as a deer in the headlights. So
yeah. We've had a lot of really neat emotional encounters, and actually just last week we had a young couple, teenage boyfriend and girlfriend kind of thing, and after the radio show, the young man that we interviewed was almost in tears as he realized that he had professed to be a Christian his whole life, and it just really dawned on him that he was in fact not a Christian, and that he did not live for Jesus Christ, and that it was all a facade. And so it's neat when God gives us the opportunity to be a part of things like that.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
That's right.
Okay, let's get back to the subject at hand. We're talking about Islam, the Quran, Muslims. We're kind of getting a little primer here from our friend Emilio Ramos. Now, Muhammad dies. They compile all of these. What did you call them? These little writings. These
the surahs.
The surahs. Okay. Well, you know,
surahs.
What's interesting is that's the same word that they use in Swahili for verse. And so when I'm doing a Bible study and they're translating, I'll say John chapter 10 verse 5. The word for verse in Swahili is surah. So, and I'm sure it's because of the Islamic influence there.
Sure. Yeah. So in Islam, for the Quran, you have surahs and ayahs. And surah being chapter, ayah being verse.
Oh, you know what? Maybe I've got that back. I think it's actually even in Swahili the way that you just said it. So I get it mixed up. But I think that
makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so they compile the Quran, and Muhammad, before he dies, he's starting to gather a little bit of gain a little bit of momentum. He's got a group of people there. How many people? Do they have an estimation of how many people were actually Muslims at the time that Muhammad died?
I don't have an exact number, but it's definitely in the thousands, and maybe even in the tens of thousands, because it's interesting what qualified a person as a Muslim at that time. At the time that Islam was spreading in Muhammad's day, they introduced something known as the jizya. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No, I haven't heard of that.
The jizya was a tax that was imposed on Jews and Christians that lived in the surrounding regions there in Mecca and Medina. And basically what it came down to was that the jizya was a tax that they would have to pay in order to either remain Jews or Christians. If not, they had to either convert to Islam or they had to gather their things and go. And if they would resist either of those options, then they would. The only other option was to die. And also, pagans at that time. Remember, I had said that Muhammad was born in a polytheistic society, and so these pagan tribes were not given the ultimatum of a jizya tax to remain pagan. Muhammad only gave them the option either to convert to Islam or die. And so many people were being converted under compulsion. And so it wasn't like people were on their own deciding to become a Muslim. As a matter of fact, immediately after Muhammad died, Islam entered into a period of what's known as the Apostate Wars, where Muslims began fighting people who, by the thousands, began to apostatize from Islam because they figured, well, Muhammad had died, surely the religion is now over, and so it's known as the Apostate Wars.
And how did Muhammad die?
You have various traditions. Some Muslims, if you talk to them today, some Muslims believe that he was poisoned by Jews. And so other people, say that he was raptured up to heaven on a horse. And so you have different accounts for the death of Muhammad. So in essence, we really don't know.
And if I'm not mistaken, one of his wives was a Jew, right? And that's the one that they allege might have participated in his poisoning if he was... Have you heard that account?
Right, that seems accurate, yes.
Yeah, that her uncle or her brother or somebody influenced her to poison him. But now, do you know how many wives Muhammad had?
I've heard anywhere from 13 to 20. 13 seems to be the predominant number that I have found just in the source material that I've looked at. Muslims, according to the Quran, Muslims are allowed to have 4 wives, whereas Muhammad was actually allowed to have as many wives as he liked. So that's kind of an interesting...
Okay. I recall there was a double standard there, but I couldn't remember what it was, because I think the issue concerned his son, if I remember correctly. His son wanted to have more wives, and he decided to limit it to 4.
That's right.
Well,
yeah, so
there's got to be certain privileges as a prophet, I mean...
That's right. There needs to be certain exemptions for the prophet, right?
It's amazing to me how much in common Mormonism has with Islam.
I brought that up in my presentation, that it is staggering, and of course you and I, standing from the standpoint of truth, seeing how Satan, in essence, has just pitched the same old lies.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
And what is the... how did the whole crescent moon get into the picture? Because if you look at the symbol, it's got, if you see a mosque, it's got a crescent moon on it with a star.
Well, according to some of the archaeologists that have done the work there in ancient Arabia and the different things that they've excavated and things, the crescent moon has actually been in existence in pre-Islamic times. And that's why I started my presentation with pre-Islamic Arabia, because a lot of times getting into pre-Islamic times really helps to unfold the religion of Islam, as you see a lot of the tenets that were in existence in pre-Islamic times and how they really spilled into Muslim theology and Muslim tradition and practice and things like that.
Some have suggested that Muhammad simply took one of the 360 gods that were available and said, this is the true God. Have you ever heard that?
Absolutely. I think Robert Morey has done a good job.
The moon god.
Documenting that in his book, Islamic Invasion, and many other sources would attest to the same thing. Universally, scholars, I think, are divided on that point, but there is some good indication of that, yeah.
Okay, let's get into the doctrines of Islam. What is the doctrine of salvation in Islam?
Well, in essence, there is no doctrine of salvation in Islam. All is the will of Allah. I mean, Allah's will is everything. You do not, in essence, have any assurance of salvation. All that you can do is hope that, in the end, Allah, in His ultimate will decide to grant you salvation. You can be a good Muslim. You can abide by the pillars, the essential tenets of Islam, which have been known as the 5 pillars of Islam. You can do all of those faithfully as a Muslim, but in the end, just ask a Muslim on the street if he knows, in fact, that he's going to be saved, or even that kind of terminology is not really exact when it comes to Muslims, but ask him if he's going to paradise, And every single time without fail, at least my experience has been, I hope so.
Right, kind of like an Arminian.
Yes, yes.
So, no, I don't.
That's a good parallel.
I don't even know anything about your soteriology, so for all I know, you could be an Arminian. But
no, I'm not. I'm unabashedly 5-point Catholic.
Okay, that's good. I did because I could have really offended you, and this could have been the end of the. Could have been the end of the interview.
I could have hung up. It would have been a short radio show.
Now, but those are the type of risks that we take here on the Narrow Mind, so it's okay.
That's what makes it a good show.
Right. Now, when it comes to their thinking, they don't assume that Christians and Jews will be saved if they're not Muslims, right? In other words, there is no hope for Christians or Jews apart from Islam.
That's right. There's no hope for them. They are infidels. They are unbelievers. They have committed what is known as basically the worst sin that a person can commit in Islam, which is the sin of shirk, which is attributing to Allah partners, and that would fall to the Christians because the Muslims have a misconception of the doctrine of the Trinity, and so they believe that we attribute partners to God. Basically, they would say that we're polytheists. And so, no, but there's no salvation outside of Islam.
Okay, and you mentioned the 5 pillars of Islam. What was interesting in my last trip to Dar es Salaam, we went to go visit a Muslim businessman, and we went into his home, and he invited us into the room where he prays. So he asks us to remove our shoes before we came in. He says, please understand, this is where I pray. And so I said, okay, well, okay, I'll respect that. So I took my shoes off, went in there and sat down, and so he said, I said, so you're a Muslim? And he says, yeah. And I said, what are the 5 pillars of Islam? And he could not remember the 5 pillars of Islam. He was embarrassed. His brother was there.
Yeah.
I had to help him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he said,
that's amazing because that's what makes you a Muslim, really.
Yeah, because this is the kind, I think that this is probably the majority of people that call themselves Muslims. They're Muslim by birth or by family or by geographical location.
It's an excellent point.
Because what happened is I invited him in. He says, please remove your shoes. I am a Muslim. This is my room of prayer. And I said, okay, sure, I'll do that. I said, I'm a Christian. I wanted to let him know from the beginning. And he said, I said, it's okay, right, because I'm a Christian, to come into your room of prayer. And he says, yes, Muhammad says that we should not discuss these things. And I said, okay, great. So I came in, and then I asked him about the 5 pillars of Islam, right? Because I figured, I want to find out from a real, African Muslim how this whole thing works.
Right.
So I wasn't really going to, I was just asking questions for the purpose of gathering information. So I asked him, I said, so I've heard about the 5 pillars of Islam. What are the 5 pillars of Islam? And he was able to recount about 3, and he's looking at his brother, and his brother's shaking his head like, I don't remember. And so at that point, he says, it's not important. We worship the same God. And then he looked at me and he said, right? And I said, I think it's best to take Muhammad's advice. It's not good to speak about these things. He started laughing, and he goes, okay, I get your point. In other words, I was telling him, no, we don't worship the same God.
That's right.
And then I was actually hoping to develop a relationship with him. In fact, when we go back, he owns an appliance store. He gets appliances, secondhand appliances from Europe, and then he sells them there. So when I go back, I'll be seeing him again. So I'm going to talk to him more.
Well, that's good.
The 5 pillars of Islam, they're not necessarily required, right? You could, okay, what are the 5 pillars of Islam? We got prayer 3 times a day, or is it 5 times a day?
Yeah, you got prayer 5 times a day. This is known as salat. You have the confession known as shahada, which is that there is no other God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. You have also the idea of fasting, which is Psalm, which is done in different, Ramadan and things like that. The giving of alms is another important one, and you have the pilgrimage to Mecca, which a lot of Muslims are under that obligation. They have to, if you are a professing Muslim, sometime during your lifetime, you must go to Mecca and do a pilgrimage there. And I've even met some Muslims, particularly Shiite Muslims, who say that jihad is actually a 6th pillar of Islam is that jihad is an obligation to all Muslims, that they fight in the cause of Allah.
So jihad being holy war.
Jihad being holy war, and this is a topic that is really gripping our society today. Is this whole thing about jihad and what exactly all this teaches, and it's really what's relevant right now in Islam, because people consider those who take jihad as a literal holy war versus what some have suggested, which is an inner struggle of, or sort of the Christian idea of sanctification.
Right.
But it is indeed, it is not. It is a literal physical struggle against all unbelievers and infidels, which would be you and I.
Okay, so the Muslim shows up on Judgment Day, and basically it's his his good works versus his failure to comply, his sin.
Yes, it's definitely his works. Muslims heavily rely on their works, and there's even with what we just said in terms of jihad. There's a passage in the Quran, Surah 4, Ayah 95, which states that those who fight in the cause of Islam will basically inherit a higher inheritance than those who just sit at home and not do anything. And so their works play a pivotal role in their getting to paradise.
Okay, now a moment ago you mentioned Shiite. What is the difference between, say, for example, a Shiite Muslim and a Sunni Muslim?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is also extremely relevant, especially when you look out into the Muslim world today and you see all of the turmoil. Maybe you turn on your news and you see all of the fighting Muslim on Muslim. Especially you look at Iraq and you hear Sunnis and Shiites blowing each other up and this kind of thing. Well, basically, Shiites are the member of the sect of Islam who decided to say that Ali, who was the son-in-law of Muhammad, was actually the first authoritative successor, what's known as a caliph. Okay. He was actually the first authoritative successor of Muhammad, and this is in contrast to Sunnis, which are actually the predominant sect of Islam. They would say no, that there were actually three caliphs, successors prior to Ali, and that what they did was authoritative for the Muslim community as well. And so that has become a major political point of division among Muslims themselves.
So we would find most Shiites in countries like Iran, and whereas Iraq, guys like Saddam Hussein, he was a Sunni, right? And the guy from Iran, the Ayatollah Khomeini, he's a Shiite also?
I believe so.
Okay. They like to kill each other.
They really do, and it's a lot of turmoil. And believe it or not, it has a lot to do with the composition of the Quran, and whose rendering of certain Quranic passages is true. And this kind of shows you that the inferiority and the insecurity of the composition of the Quran, how it came together. Some Muslims don't believe in certain passages that are in the Quran today. For example, if you go to the store and you pick up a popular translation of the Quran, let's say Yusuf Ali, many Shiites would not agree with what's in there. And they would say that a lot of the verses have been taken out and have been missing ever since the time of Muhammad. And this is what the Hadith plays a pivotal role in doing, is kind of filling in the gaps where most of the Muslims have gotten it wrong. And so it's extremely complicated. It's a complicated situation that Islam is in today.
All right, and when you talk about the God of Islam, Allah,
very important.
How is he different? Of course, we would understand that he's not Trinitarian. He's simply monotheistic. But how is he different in character, in person, in the way that he relates to creation according to Islam?
Well, I would say that the essential issue obviously would be in terms of strict monotheism and the denial of the Trinity and such. But, Allah is essentially unknowable in the Muslim religion. He is not knowable, in essence. When a Muslim goes to paradise, for example, he will not be in the presence of Allah. He will never see Allah. And so it's a very, very different theology than that of Christianity, where we believe, obviously, that heaven is not heaven unless God is there.
Right.
But in Islam, Allah is so transcendent, so beyond us, that He will never come into contact with human beings. And I think that is a frightening proposition.
And doesn't the Quran teach also that He is unknowable?
Yeah, He's unknowable.
So really, His person is unknowable. Yeah,
that's right. You know, in essence, some of the attributes that are ascribed to Him, but you will never personally, as a Muslim, come into contact with that God. And so it's extremely confusing that you believe in a God that is, quote-unquote, all-merciful, but you never see that merciful God. So it's
interesting.
Very, very interesting, yes.
And how do we mentioned two sects, the Shiites and the Sunnis. Is there a third sect that's also worth noting? I mean,
there are minor sects. There are minor other sects, but no, Shiites, Sunnis. That's your predominant sect. And Islam. What I tell people is that Islam is such a big subject that if you're going to tackle the religion of Islam, if you're going to spend your time trying to do your good apologetics and listening to the narrow view and getting your facts and listening and getting equipped, you really do need to focus on Sunnis and Shiites. There are other sects. Umayyas is a sect. There are other various sects, but no, that's the predominantly two big sects that you need to worry about.
Okay, and do you have any information as to how Sunnis and Shiites might look at, say, for example, a guy like Louis Farrakhan, the leader of the American black movement called the Nation of Islam?
I've actually asked imams, which are the spiritual leaders in a mosque, kind of the equivalent of our pastor. I've gone into mosques several times and spoken to imams and asked them questions about Farrakhan, and they do not consider Farrakhan a Muslim at all. He is not. He would be a heretic.
Okay, that's interesting because he thinks everybody else is a heretic. Now, what was the guy's name that was under? He wasn't under Farrakhan. He was under Elijah Muhammad here in the U.S. The guy that they made a movie about. His name escapes my memory at the moment. Malcolm X, right. So he was part of the black Muslim movement, and then he went to the Middle East, right, and saw really what, I think he went to Mecca or Medina or something like that, and saw the real kind of the heart of Islam, and realized that these black Americans had it all wrong.
Right.
Now, what is it that's in, you mentioned the pilgrimage, and that's to Mecca, or is that to Medina?
That is to Mecca.
Okay, so
Mecca has what's known as the Sacred Mosque,
okay.
And it's also where, I don't know if you've heard of the Kaaba.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about.
Mm-hmm. The Kaaba is a shrine that is in existence in Mecca today. It supposedly was in existence back in Muhammad's time, and in essence it was that shrine where the different polytheist religions were represented. And Mecca, in pre-Islamic times, was a very busy place of a major metropolitan of just trade and business and whatnot. The different tribes would come and worship their respective deities there. Some 360-some-odd idols were represented there. And so when Muhammad took over Mecca, he also took over the shrine, the Kaaba, and set up Allah as the only God to be worshipped there.
So is there something about them touching that shrine that's some type of religious experience, or there's some value in that? How do they see that?
Yeah, there's a sacred, what's known as a sacred black stone, and it some would say that it's a meteor that Muslims saw fall out of the sky, and they venerate it as some sort of sacred stone from Allah. And Muslims are said to go around this shrine, and some of them touch it and to revere the sacred stone, and they do various rituals like throw stones at the Kaaba in a symbolic fashion, symbolically representing that they are casting stones at the devil, and all sorts of different practices.
Sounds somewhat superstitious.
Very superstitious, and that's what I pointed out in my introduction, that pre-Islamic Arabia was extremely superstitious.
All right. We've actually, do you know if they've got that presentation that you gave up on their website at all? The Evangelical Debate Society, is that available anywhere that you know of?
I don't know if they posted any of that, but I know that they're working feverishly to try to get all that together, including the DVD.
Okay, because I've got a copy of the MP3, and I'd be willing to podcast it for you if you like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll do that since I'm not doing any programs. I'll go ahead and podcast that tomorrow for Tuesday.
Okay.
All right, Emilio, we are out of time. Amazing how fast an hour goes by, isn't it?
It's amazing. Thank you so very much for having me on, and I appreciate all that you guys are doing, and God bless you guys, and hopefully I'll see you in Texas.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to know you and your wife and visiting our listeners out in Texas. So I appreciate the invitation to spend some time with you while I'm there. All right, folks, we're out of time, and we're glad that you joined us on this edition of The Narrow Mind. Now, if you're listening via podcast, I should point out that you are listening to the low-quality podcast unless you are an annual subscriber. The high-quality podcast is available for our annual subscribers. So if you're not an annual subscriber, you can subscribe to the Unchained Radio Archive. It's got hundreds of MP3s, debates, and other goodies in there for $39.99. And with that, you'll also receive a copy of my book, The Baptism Cult, and you will receive a feed to the high-quality podcast feed. So be sure and sign up for that. When you sign up for that, you actually help pay the monthly expenses here at The Narrow Mind. All right, we'll see you back on Friday for our next live show. That'll be Friday, the 15th of June. Open Phones Friday at 6 p.m., taking your calls live. Until then, may God continue to bless the study of His Word.